The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
When I signed my first contract with Chatterbox, I said, no more Reed. I will not work at Chatterbox if I have to host a show with Reed. And then when I signed my renewal with Chatterbox, my second contract, I said, no more Elliott. So we got rid of Elliott too. And now we're down to my guy Casey in the producer chair today. Shout out to Casey McCollister. And my guy Jacob Tissett. Gentlemen, good morning. How are we today?
It's good. It's a good day. It's a good day. It was a tough weekend, tougher than it needed to be. But it's a good day. Casey, you're already an hour in.
Yeah,
Casey, he's loose. He's ready to go.
Yeah, I got all my college football takes pretty early on, and all my teams kind of pretty much got it pretty easy in the bracket. But
no, it was a fun new twist this year, where if you made your conference championship game and lost, you got rewarded.
Yeah,
it was cool.
What dreams are made of, baby. That's what you want to do. Reward losing. There you go. Which technically, I guess, if you put the 3 loss teams in, you'd be rewarding that. But look, the bottom line is the college football playoff, it got what it wanted. It got people talking. It got people pissed off. And it did something that I didn't think we would do. I was against the 12-team playoff because I thought it would be absolutely stupid because no one gives a rip about the 13th team in college football. Well, guess what? We kind of care about that 13th team in college football because, and maybe not necessarily the 13th ranked team, but the first team out, if you will, the team that was officially booted out. It came down to Alabama and SMU, and that's really what has everyone talking more than anything else. Is it came down to that. The committee has been talking out of both sides of their mouth for really since the college football playoff started. But that was the whole purpose of this. It was never done to give a clear-cut blueprint. You must do this to make the playoff. The most simplest way to make the playoff is to win your conference championship. At the end of the day, that's the best way to do it. Second best way to do it is, obviously, take care of your non-conference slate. Obviously, don't lose more than 2 games. You lose 2 games, you're safe. Anything more than that, you're going to be on the bubble as far as that's concerned. And you got to make sure you at least play somebody, or at least so I thought. I thought strength of schedule mattered. Everybody, that has been one thing that at least was the most consistent point throughout the 14 playoff era was the strength of schedule, was who you play mattered. That's why teams loaded up their non-con. And when teams didn't load up their non-con, people used it against them. Last year, Michigan, won the national championship, and it took about 2 months into the season for people to give them any kind of props because they were obliterating teams, but they were playing absolute nobodies, and no one wanted to give them any credit, or at least I didn't. And they didn't play absolutely anybody, but they go on to win a national championship, but it was a talking point against them early on. Should the fact that they didn't play anybody be used against them? That was something the committee was very worried about last year, but they overlooked it for Michigan's sake. They didn't overlook anything this year. They said, strength of schedule be damned. They just went with the path of least resistance. Kudos to the committee, though, because what I don't want to hear anymore is SEC bias. They picked the brand or brand bias. Let's forget brand bias. SMU, the Mustangs, I joked with Kev the other day. I was like, when I think of SMU, I think of Larry Brown, the former 76ers head coach that went to coach their college basketball team. I don't even think of SMU from a football standpoint. But they rewarded SMU. They got to their conference championship game. They only lost 2 games on the season, and they put them in the playoff over Alabama. Big bad Alabama, right? The brand, the SEC, there'd be more views and eyes and everything, ratings with Alabama. And the committee basically has told everybody, pipe down on the bias thing. There's no SEC bias. There's no brand bias. They put SMU in, which I have a problem with. We'll get to that later. But at the end of the day, the 12-team playoff field is set. These are the teams we figured would be in the mix, and it came down to SMU, Alabama. I want to say I'm surprised, but I shouldn't be. I don't know. What was your biggest takeaway of this, Jacob? Because everyone seems to have a hot take on the SMU, Alabama thing. I think you can go either way with it if you're the committee.
Yeah, look, going into the ACC championship game, that is, I was pretty optimistic that Alabama was going to get in the playoff. I thought There were a lot of different ways that game could go in which Alabama was going to get in. And in the first half, it certainly looked like one of those ways was taking place. And in my mind, a Clemson blowout certainly put Alabama in the field. It was a Clemson blowout or an SMU win, and Alabama was going to the playoff. And obviously, neither of those happened. Clemson wins on a last-second 56-yard field goal. And I do think that maybe Dabo, with all the Alabama hate in his heart, made that game closer at the end on purpose just to make sure SMU got in on a close loss. He knows what would have happened if Clemson kept the foot on the gas if SMU got blown out. But look, I don't think losing a game should just be nothing. I understand a lot of people think that conference championships shouldn't punish people, but we're not punishing them for playing in the game. We're punishing them for losing the game. And I think that's a big difference. And when you don't play anybody all season long, I think it's important to beat a ranked team, and SMU didn't do that. I think that has to matter. I think this format is going to change, and it's going to change as quick as it possibly can, which is not next year, but the year after, and it's going to go away from the automatic bids, because the fact that a two-loss team in a lesser conference is viewed as the same as a three-loss team in a greater conference, that's not great, and that's not what college football should be. We should be trying to get the 12 best teams, not the 12 teams that won the most games. I don't think that's important whatsoever. And maybe a lot of people disagree with that, and that's fine. But I don't think simply winning your games when you don't play anyone is enough to get into the playoff, or much less get a bye. I would assume that conference champions do stay into the playoff. That they're never going to take that away because the conference commissioners wouldn't vote for it. But the byes will certainly go away. There's no way they're going to keep giving a bye or a chance for a bye to Boise State and Arizona State. That's just a ridiculous format. And we're seeing it now because the losing teams of these conference championships are getting rewarded. You have Penn State with the easiest path in the playoff by a mile. Texas with the coveted 5 spot. They're going to be probably a 2-touchdown favorite in both games, over a touchdown favorite in both games. It's insane what these teams' draws are getting, and you're just not rewarding the best team in the country through the regular season, which was Oregon. They went undefeated. They won their conference championship, and they play the winner of Tennessee and Ohio State in the second round. That's insane to me. You're giving them, without a doubt, at least in my opinion, chat, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but I would be shocked if that's not the hardest second-round matchup, at least on paper. I mean, the Ohio State and Tennessee, those are two teams we were talking about competing for a bye pretty deep into this season. So a brutal, brutal draw for Oregon, and I expect it to affect them drastically down the line as it's affected their national championship odds. As soon as the bracket came out, Texas shot up to number 1 in championship odds. So that just tells you right there why these draws matter and why these paths matter. But when it comes to Alabama and SMU, look, I'm not going to complain a ton about Alabama. I think you lose to a 6-6 Oklahoma, you lose to Vanderbilt, you lost your chance. I think it hurts college football to put SMU in over a team like Alabama. I think these major schools are going to go and cancel any major Power 4 game out of conference that they have on their schedule. And before the chat says, well, Alabama did not get in because they're non-conference. They lost conference games. Look, I know that. But they didn't reward strength of schedule. So why would you give yourself a chance to lose those games? SMU lost their only difficult non-conference game. It didn't matter. They won their easy schedule. You play your easy games out of conference because the SEC doesn't have a cakewalk conference schedule like SMU has in the ACC. You're going to play those ranked teams in your conference schedule. So the SEC and the Big Ten as well, no, never play those games outside of conference ever again. I expect it to go that way in the near future and cancel a lot of these home and homes that fans have been looking forward to. And that's a real shame because those are the games that are great for college football. And the committee turned their nose up at playing a decent schedule this year.
Yeah, that's and like I said, with the playoff, the whole purpose is to crown a national champion, and a national champion will be crowned. But I think there's a couple of teams that didn't make the playoff that you can argue have a better chance of winning a national championship than a handful of teams that made the playoff. And I know that's not how you gauge everything. If that's the case, just pick the teams and make a field heading into the season. I get that. I'm not really arguing that. But what I'm saying is, and I think what we're saying is this process clearly is not sifting out the teams correctly.
No.
And even when you get the teams, it's not being set up correctly. You're right. Oregon, the whole purpose of being the number 1 seed, to compete to be the number 1 overall team in the country and to be the 1 seed, is to have the clearest cut path to the national championship game. That's the same, obviously in the March Madness. If you look at the brackets there, if you are a 1 seed, your entire path to the national championship or the Final Four is playing the lowest seeds or the highest seeds possible throughout the entire thing. You're not running into any challenges until you get further into this thing right off the bat. Oregon's reward after getting a first-round bye, congratulations, you might have Ohio State in a rematch right off the bat. Ohio, you already brought that up. That's wild. And then you look at the fact that, you look at Indiana, Notre Dame, Notre Dame, if they have Indiana and Boise State to get to the semifinals. You're opening up with Indiana. Notre Dame should take care of business against Indiana. And no offense to Boise, who I really like Boise. I love Ashton JT. I love that storyline there. But Notre Dame should take care of Boise State as well. So there's just some teams that have easier paths, but where they're seated should have more difficult paths. So the format is incorrect. And, Jake, I want them to get rid of the auto bids or the auto buys or whatever you want to call those. Yeah. I just don't know if they will, because they tried so hard to make sure the conference championship meant something. But I guess the auto buys, you don't have to provide that. You win your conference championship like Clemson, you're in. You don't, and they didn't technically get a bye. But either way, not a fan of the format. If you have to add a couple more teams to this thing to make it even, to where everyone has to play right off the bat, fine. But at the end of the day, never would have guessed back in August, Jake, that we'd be saying Indiana, Boise State, Indiana, Boise State, and you go across the list, and SMU would be in the very first 12-team college football playoff. Got to love it, I guess.
The biggest issue with this playoff, and I think it's something that some people are starting to talk about now that the bracket has come out, but it's been my opinion the biggest issue this entire time, is we put every conference in the same basket. If you win the Mountain West, if you win the ACC, if you win the SEC, if you win the Big Ten, you are all thrown in the same basket with the same rewards and the same chance at a bye. That is insane. Nobody can look me in the eyes and tell me that these conferences are equal. They're not. There are drastic differences between the strength of these different conferences, and they should not be thrown in the same basket. Giving a first-round bye to conference champions is insanity to me. There is no way that you can say a 12-seed Arizona State or 12th-ranked Arizona State should be the 4 seed and have a bye. That makes no sense in my mind. And then you have Boise State with the 3 seed. They're ranked 9th in the country. That shouldn't happen. Not only do we need to get rid of the conference champion buys, I would go a step further. I would say we should get rid of all auto bids. No conference champion should get an auto bid. Not even the SEC and not the Big Ten. Put the top 12 teams in the country in the playoff, because what are we trying to do? We're not trying to give participation trophies to whoever deserves it more. Nobody could tell me about SMU getting in the playoffs without saying, oh, they deserve it. They just deserve it. That doesn't matter. The 12 best teams should get in the playoffs and give us the teams that deserve to make the championship. And that's not what this format gives us, which is a shame.
Yeah, people will say, well, Jake, that's an elitist mentality, and you're all about the bigger programs. You can say bigger programs, but it's best. The better programs. Like, that's just the reality of it. If it's an elitist mentality, then I have an elitist mentality when it comes to this at the end of the day. But nonetheless, and by the way, SMU, like I said, the brand bias thing, the committee ignored it. They could have put Alabama in. Alabama at Penn State. I promise you that would not be a noon kickoff. That would be probably the Friday night matchup. Whiteout at Penn State. That's the matchup that they could have had. That's the matchup that they should have had. And instead they went with an SMU Penn State matchup. That's a noon kick. Even the TV slots are telling you, yeah, this game, But with that being said, so let's pop that field up on the screen, Casey. Let's take a look at this as we close this part of the conversation out. There it is, the college football playoff. Obviously, Tennessee, Ohio State in the 9-8. The winner goes on to take on Oregon in the second round. Texas will welcome in Clemson, which will be a good one there. The winner goes on to face Arizona State. Indiana at Notre Dame. SMU at Penn State. We could have a Notre Dame, Georgia, Penn State, Boise, Texas, Arizona State, to maybe an Ohio State, Oregon quarterfinal slate right there. But what's the matchup you're most intrigued by, Jake, when you look at that field?
I think the two on the top are the best ones. Ohio State, Tennessee, both by national championship contender and brand. I think that's the best game. And then on the right side there, an interstate matchup with distantly the most expensive tickets in the first round. Indiana, Notre Dame. That place is going to be rocking. I think both of those are going to be a lot of fun. I would expect Texas to take care of business over Clemson pretty handedly. And I also don't think SMU's worth a darn at all. So Penn State's, I think, going to win that one pretty easily as well. But Ohio State and Notre Dame, I think, are going to have a tougher battle than a lot of people want to admit, especially Ohio State with Tennessee come to town.
So it's December 9th as we sit here right now. I was a huge fan of Quinn Ewers coming into the year. I was high on Texas coming into the year. I'm not high on Texas at all anymore. I'm going to call the Clemson-Texas outcome. I think Clemson knocks off Texas in that first round. I don't feel good about Texas. I think it's like an 11-point line. Texas at home, 11-point favorite over Clemson in that matchup, and that one will be, of course, obviously in Texas, but it's a 4:00 kickoff on TNT. The one I'm most intrigued by, of course, Tennessee, Ohio State. Indiana, Notre Dame is interesting. I just don't think that one. I know Notre Dame's an 8-point favorite. We saw Indiana when they had to face a real team the only time this season, and they didn't look good. Notre Dame is arguably playing. We're not talking about best team in football, but I think of this playoff field right here, Notre Dame is playing the best football of pretty much anyone that's in this field right now heading into this slate. Now, will the break cool them off? We'll find out. But I think Notre Dame routes Indiana. I don't think that's going to be a good game, but I find it intriguing just to see Indiana in the playoff. I think the Tennessee-Ohio State will be the most entertaining game of those, but I think Clemson-Texas is going to be a really good game, and I think Clemson comes out on top. I just don't feel good about Texas right now. I don't know why. I like Sarkisian. I've been a fan of Ewers. Texas I don't know the last time I watched Texas and thought, man, they look like an elite threat to win a national championship. I just don't see it. Clemson, they win their conference championship. They got a little bit of that momentum going right now. I'm going to roll with Clemson early on. That's my early upset, if you will. Not that you have to call one now, but I like Clemson over Texas when we get to that matchup.
I agree with your concerns about Texas, and I'm circling that second-round game against Arizona State where those are going to come to fruition for me. My issue with Clemson is just Phil Maffa's been banged up. He's really struggled in the last 4 games. They're starting running back, and they lost their backup running back on a kick return on an ankle injury that looked pretty ugly. So if Clemson can't run the ball against Texas, who's already a pretty good rushing defense, and Klubnik's going to have to throw the ball 30 times in Austin, I just don't see that going their way. But certainly, if they're somehow able to get healthy in the next 2 or 3 weeks, that could be a problem for Texas because Clemson's not going to make mistakes. Clemson's going to play a well-coached, sound game and certainly give them some fight. But Mike Ackley, the resident Clemson fan in the chat, is saying they have no chance. They're just happy to be here. So take that for what you will. But I do just want to address something going on in the chat. I see a lot of people in the chat saying my playoff takes are only because I'm mad that Alabama's not a top 12 team in the country. I have bad news for you guys, chat. The playoff committee said they were a top 12 team in the country. They said they absolutely are a top 12 team in the country, not even 12th. They had them ranked 11th. But this terrible system and format that we have here doesn't send the top 12 teams to the playoff. It sends a 10-3 Clemson, who happened to play in the ACC and happened to upset the favorite in their ACC championship and got them in. And so Alabama was a top 12 team. So if you're going to, critique my takes about this playoff, just make sure you get them right.
That's all you ask. That's all you ask.
Right.
No, and I like to flip the script on people too. If we go back to that SMU Alabama debate, people kept bringing up, okay, SMU, they deserve to be in. They deserve to be in. And the question I always just ask, it's a very difficult question, and it was very tough for me to come up with this question. But Jake, why? That's it. That's just as simple. Why? SMU deserves to be in because why? They played nobody. Right. The 2 bodies that they played, they lost to. Their strength of schedule stinks. By every metric out there, they don't even shed a light to Alabama. And yes, Alabama has an additional loss, but I think when you use common sense with this, yes, we could bring up the losses they had in the SEC play, but at the end of the day, when you play a schedule as difficult as Alabama's, the likelihood and the probability of sustaining a second to third loss, that's a lot more, that's understanding, that's more forgivable. And maybe not on every year, but on a year where I don't think there's a clear-cut favorite. I know Oregon's undefeated, but, they looked vulnerable against Penn State. Penn State has no offense. They did against Oregon, and that's the undefeated number 1 team in the country. Oregon, you can score on Oregon. I don't think that, this field is not very good. So to just use a blanket statement of 3 losses, Alabama's out, I think you have to use the numbers more. If you're going to try to comb through the weeds to find reasons to put SMU in when they have no metrics to support them being in, and ignore all the metrics that support Alabama being in just because you don't like them, that's not how this works. And I'm trying to figure out, why do you think the committee ultimately did that? Was that to keep, I think Shaw came, I know he came out to your show, at Champions, last week, but he came out to our live show yesterday and brought up a good point, like almost as if they put SMU in just to save the importance of the conference championship.
Exactly.
Because if you punish SMU, and I don't like giving Shaw credit, but I thought it was a good point. If you punish SMU for losing an additional game only because you played in your conference championship, that's going to create so much more noise that Lane Kiffin and some of the other coaches were basically discussing earlier in the season that, hey, I don't want to play an extra game. If we play an extra game, we're vulnerable to have that used against us. I think that's a good point, too. Why else would you put them in? Because there's no other reason to put them in, and they put them in. It just didn't make any sense to me.
It was to value conference championship games and to keep teams wanting to play in them. That's all it was, and we saw it on more than just SMU. We saw it with Penn State not dropping below 6, which they definitely should have if you look at their resume. We saw Texas at 5 after losing to Georgia, which they definitely shouldn't be with their resume. I think we saw this across the board. They're protecting their conference championship losers because they heard people say this entire season that maybe you don't want to get to a conference championship, and they wanted to do away with that. My question is, how is it protecting the conference championship, Kenner, if you put the conference champion below the team they just beat? Doesn't that devalue the game they just played? You're telling me the team that lost the conference championship is better than the team that won it. Then the team that won it shouldn't get to go to the playoff. I don't understand how you can justify both Clemson and SMU. If you think SMU is the best team in the ACC, regardless of the outcome of the ACC championship, then do away with the conference auto bids. Get Clemson out of there. Have every conference get a bid for their best team if you don't think the game determines who's the best team in the conference. I don't understand how you justify this unless you put SMU below Clemson and above Alabama, and these rankings just continue to make less sense.
Yeah, so I had a buddy send this to me too. Says, ultimately, by seeding Penn State and Notre Dame too high, you seeded Ohio State and Tennessee too low, SMU over the team that beat them 12 hours prior, the committee is basically telling you to lose 1 or fewer regular season games.
Yeah.
They're also saying that the second loss will trump any big win. The biggest win of the season was the conference championship loss for SMU. So teams will listen, and schedules will be extremely light moving forward. I've said this for weeks. I was curious what they were going to do as we wrap this subject. Ohio State over the next 6 or 7 years, they have 3 home and home series with they have a home and home that starts next year with Texas. Texas will be at the Shoe, and then they'll be at Texas the following year. Then at Alabama, and then Alabama at the Shoe, a couple later on down the road, and then Georgia at the Shoe, and then Ohio State at Georgia. I don't think those games get played. There's no purpose for those to be played. You win those, okay, great. That's super. That's fantastic. But if you lose them, you lose way more than you gain by winning. Yeah. So you may as well just put some MAC team or some no-name team on there because, hey, it worked for SMU. It worked for Indiana. It worked for everybody else. At least Boise State put Oregon on the schedule and nearly came out on top in that one. So, I have a problem with that. We'll see what happens when it's all said and done.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Buckeyes aren't going to play those games, or at least the majority of them. I don't think it makes any sense. It would be a crazy decision for Ross Bjork to sit there and keep that schedule intact as it is right now. If you look at Penn State's future non-conference schedule, they got this stuff ironed out, man. They don't play a real team in the non-conference for a long time. After the way the rankings went on Sunday, the Alabama AD, Greg Burns, said he immediately got on the phone with the ADs of the other schools he was planning on playing, the major schools that are in the same boat Alabama's in now with these rankings, and they're going to have conversations about not even buying out of these games, just straight up eliminating them, because both teams would benefit so much from not playing them. So you won't even have money changing hands in some of these instances because everyone's going to agree that this is the better situation for these schools to try to win a national championship. So it's a shame. The fans fans continue to lose, and we saw that on Saturday as well, something people aren't talking about. Everyone that was at Atlanta for the SEC championship, people in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship said those games had an exhibition feel, said the fans were having fun rooting on their team, but it was an exhibition feel to the games, was the quote from the sideline reporters at both stadiums. And that's just such a shame, because the conference championships used to mean a lot. And now that both these teams get in and the losers are rewarded, it's a shame that no one cares about these games nearly as much anymore.
This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, and the producer chair, Jacob Tissett, with you here on a Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. All instant reaction, of course, to open up the show today. The college football playoff field is officially set. It's the inaugural 12-team college football playoff, and we just have to wait a couple weeks now. I used to hate Selection Sunday. It'd always be that, just like this month or this year, first Sunday of December, and then you have to wait till New Year's Eve before you even get to watch the playoff games. Well, now we just have to wait 2 weeks, December 20th and 21st, a big slate of games as we just talked about. But we're going to transition over to the NFL. The Cincinnati Bengals, Monday Night Football tonight. They're on the road taking on the Dallas Cowboys. We'll go 3 and out with Jacob later on in the show, but we'll take a look at the NFL scoreboard, what caught our attention during Week 14, or NFL Sunday, if you will, yesterday afternoon. We'll get to all that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. And we are back. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Well, no matter how much smack I talk about your team, Jake, yesterday I had to see that graphic, that evil, evil graphic that every fan just dreads seeing.
Yeah.
Eliminated. My Cleveland Browns have officially been eliminated from playoff contention. So you're telling me they don't have a chance. Season's done. Oh, well, don't care. Jameis Magic officially has, it ended in the first quarter yesterday against the Steelers. But nonetheless, it's all about the draft moving forward, baby. And maybe the Bengals will do their part, and we'll have this amazing draft special. Yeah, I mean, it's all about April, but imagine if we could have this great draft special where we have the Browns and the Bengals both in the top 10. I mean, that's what it's all about.
That'd be something special.
Bengals in action tonight. I know we'll get to your 3 and out. 3 reasons you feel they'll win. 3 reasons you're concerned as the Bengals on the road taking on the Dallas Cowboys that are on tonight, Monday Night Football. But overall, I know yesterday's Selection Sunday college football was what everyone was talking about when it was all said and done. But a lot of big games in the NFL yesterday for both the AFC and NFC. I don't know about you. This is that time of year in the NFL where it's like you see some weird results. You see some teams that are losing to teams that you just kind of scratch your head saying, what the heck happened? This is that weird, dull moment of the season where you see light at the end of the tunnel, but it's still a month away, the playoffs. A lot of teams who have been eliminated, they're looking at this like, well, our season's done. You're starting to see some ugly football because teams feel like, okay, we're a playoff team. We know it. How do you keep that intensity going? Other teams have checked out because they know that their playoff chances are slim to none or they're completely done. This is that weird stretch of the NFL season where you see light at the end of the tunnel, but man, oh man, interesting slate of games yesterday. Your overall takeaway, what was the biggest result yesterday that caught your attention?
It was a great day of games. I love when the Bengals play on primetime and I get to watch all the games, don't miss anything. It's a nice change up. But look, it's the Dolphins for me because not only are they kind of eliminated at 6 and 7. They're not looking great, but they're playing good football. And I understand the defense allowed 26 points to a questionable Jets offense, but when you look at who beat the Dolphins on the outside in that game, it's Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, who just both had monster games. And I think we all knew that even though Aaron Rodgers does struggle and has struggled his entire career in New York, this was going to happen at some point. He was going to have a good game at some point. It just happened to come against the Dolphins, and for them to persevere, get through that, and pull out a win in overtime. I think that tells you a lot about where Tua is after his injury, where that team is trending. And I heard a lot of people talking about Mike McDaniel potentially on the hot seat. And I think wins like this are what's going to cool that down. Continuing to win these close games, get the job done at home. I think that's important for him in the future of this team. Maybe this season's lost, but I think long term these wins are very, very important for for that Dolphins team. The other one is Minnesota, because I guess the question is, when are we going to just start respecting Minnesota as a legitimate Super Bowl contender, as one of the best teams in the NFC, when Sam Darnold might be an MVP contender? I don't know, but some of these numbers are getting ridiculous now. The wins are starting to mount. Minnesota's legit, and they put up 42 points against an Atlanta defense that I've loved all year long. It might be time to put the old family dog down. I think Kirko might have to go. It's Michael Penix's time in Atlanta. I want to see the lefty for the Falcons get back out there and make something happen. He's looked exciting throwing the ball in the little bit we've seen from him so far in Atlanta. So that'd be great. But yeah, Kirk's time's done, at least for now. Maybe he gets healthy and can be okay again in the future, but not anymore. It's going to have to be Michael Penix if they want to salvage that season, because I believe they are now tied with the Bucs at the top of that division. So could lose that division now after going out to a pretty good lead to start the year. So not great.
Bucks actually hold.
Oh wow, Bucs with a 1-game lead after the events of Sunday. So that's interesting to see for sure. And then the Bills with a taste of our medicine. Bengals fans, another MVP caliber quarterback puts up 40+ and takes the loss. So it was good to see that it can happen to other people. But great week of football, and Bengals wrap it up tonight on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I had in my notes too. I was like, man, I just feel for Josh Allen. Nobody can understand what Josh Allen went through yesterday, throwing for 342 yards, 3 touchdowns, QBR at 90. I mean, just played lights out, put 42 points up on the board, and still couldn't come away with the win. That was actually that was a very entertaining game. I mean, both quarterbacks throwing for over 300+ yards, 5 touchdowns combined between the two. Both teams, ran the football well. Both teams rushing for over 100 yards yesterday. Good matchup between the Bills and the Rams. Rams quietly just continuing to put it together. I look at the Rams because we just think, I look at a team like Cincinnati as a quarterback and 2 really good wide receivers, and you just think that, you have those 3 things. If you have 2 good wide receivers and a quarterback, your team is set. And the Bengals just can't consistently win football games. I look at the Rams, and I know there's been injuries to Nakua and Cooper throughout the season, but I look at Stafford and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua and guys like that, and I'm like, they're 7-6. Like, it's just wild how many pieces you truly need to be a good football team. Because I look at a team like the Rams and the Bengals, and you see the star power, and you just question, how the hell are they only 7-6? How have the Bengals only won 4 games to this point? Yeah. But those are 2 teams right now that are the most interesting when you look at the star power on the field, and the record just doesn't seem to match it.
No, not at all. It's very frustrating to see our star players play well, and a lot of times around the league when other star players don't play well, it still results in wins. And we know that's not the case for us. Unless our guys are putting up record-breaking numbers, this team doesn't have a chance. And that's more and more frustrating as the season rolls on and you see that other teams are able to find wins. And it's another reason why I continue to kind of drift away from defending Zach Taylor and defending this coaching staff, because you see so many other staffs around the league be able to navigate around the different struggles thrown their way, and it just seems like if everything's not going perfectly for the staff we have in Cincinnati right now, then it's just not going to work at all. So I think that's just another tally in the negative pile for Taylor.
12-1, the Kansas City Chiefs, and it is becoming just a joke at this point how every single week, there's some teams who are snake bitten and they just find ways to lose, crazy ways to lose. Like, and the Bengals, they're not finding ways to lose. They lose the same way every single time, right? Like it's the way when I watch a Bengals game, I watch the same game every week. Just like when I watch the Chiefs, I watch the same game every week. And that's not a shot at Cincinnati. It's just opposite ends of the spectrum at this point. Cincinnati loses consistently the same way. In Kansas City, they just win consistently the same way. Ugly. Like, I know people say that all that matters is, winning. The result is all that matters. But at 12-1, I don't know how many of you have Chiefs fans who are Chiefs fans out there, but I know they're defending back-to-back Super Bowl champions. But, like, how good do Chiefs fans feel after every single week? Like, wouldn't just one time you want to come away with the win that you felt like we truly went out there and won that football game? The Chiefs are 12-1. This reminds me so much of back in 2021 when the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think, got out to that 11-0 start of the season. But I said, I think in the history of the NFL, that might be the worst 11-0 team of all time. This Chiefs team, I know they're defending back-to-back Super Bowl champions, but this might be the worst 12-1 football team of all time. I just don't get it. They do not look in sync offensively. I know you have Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes and all those weapons out there. Like they, other teams can move the ball on them pretty easily. It's just a wild season for, Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. And I know when you're a fan base like Cincinnati's that hates the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm sure it makes it even worse watching that they just find ways to win even when they don't play well.
Yeah, no, it's the most frustrating thing in the world. I think the devil magic is coming to fruition basically every single week in and week out. It's crazy to see. The Chiefs have had 3 different kickers make a game-winning field goal as time expired in the fourth quarter this season. No other team in the history of the NFL has had even one. Having an all-pro kicker like Harrison Butker go down with a torn meniscus earlier this year usually means at least games like last night turn into losses, but it turns out your third practice squad kicker of the year can doink it off the upright and bang it through. So, yeah, they just keep finding ways to win, or maybe the other teams keep finding ways to lose. I think either way you slice it at this point, you got to give a lot of credit to the Chiefs and the Chiefs coaching staff, because I do think a lot of this, not only are they really, really good and they win a lot of games themselves, and they find ways to keep things close, and they deserve all the credit in the world for that. But I also think the mystique of playing the Chiefs and the things that could possibly go their way down the stretch is starting to get really, really big and starting to get to the teams that are playing against Kansas City. And the whole time you're thinking, oh, we did something, to give us a lead in the fourth quarter. Well, what's Patrick Mahomes going to do when he takes the field now? And I think that's in the back of a lot of these guys' minds, and I think that's leading to a lot of these wins for Kansas City, whether we know it or not. So I think it's interesting, and it's something that we saw with the Patriots for sure, down at the end towards the end at least, of their dynasty with Brady and Belichick, how teams just playing the Patriots was a challenge in and of itself before you even stepped on the field. I think that's starting to happen now with the Chiefs as well, and they're starting to beat teams mentally before they even get on the field.
I know you guys already touched on you and Casey mentioned Sam Darnold and the Vikings a little bit ago. I know on Friday we talked about Jared Goff coming off Thursday Night Football. I'm surprised his name's not being thrown out there more in the MVP conversation. And you just lightly touched on it. Sam Darnold is not just having one of those, for instance, like when Joe Flacco took over Cleveland last year, had a very fun, good run. You watch Jameis Winston. He's a fun quarterback. He's having a good run in Cleveland. He's putting up numbers. And that's like what you expect from those bridge type quarterbacks. Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield. Baker at least got an extension, but some of these journeyman quarterbacks, and I think Sam Darnold's been put in that category. But what Sam Darnold is doing right now, we're at the point now, it's week 14. I refuse to give him any credit earlier in the season because we see this all the time. Teams get out to hot starts. Kyler Murray at times has been an MVP candidate. Tua has been MVP candidate about the halfway point of the season, and then everything derails in the back half. Sam Darnold is 6th in total yards passing on the season. He's top 5 in he's 28 touchdowns. He's close to 70. He's completing about 68% of his passes. Yeah. Top 6 in total yards passing. He's literally doing absolutely everything, and his team has one of the best records and is one of the best teams in football. Sam Darnold, good for the Vikings. This is a good problem to have. You just drafted McCarthy last year in the first round, and now poor them. They have to decide, man, do we move on from Darnold or do we go to McCarthy? This is a good problem to have. That's how good Sam Darnold has been. And we're seeing 2 fun storylines in that same division with the Vikings and Lions. Sam Darnold and Jared Goff, good for both of them. They've been really good stories this season.
Yeah, no, it's been great to see both of those guys. And I think you put it perfectly there. It's a good problem to have, but it's a major problem that the Vikings have now next year going into the season. If Sam Darnold wins a playoff game, or God forbid 2 playoff games, what do you do next year? You can't look at your fans and let that quarterback walk. You can't do it. There's no way you can sell that. But you just took J.J. McCarthy top 10 in the draft, and the only reason you even have Darnold is because J.J. McCarthy got hurt, or he'd be your starter this year, at least we think. So I don't know what the Vikings are going to do at the end of this season. Sam Darnold could make it really easy on them and turn back into a pumpkin for these last 4 or 5 weeks and stink it up in the playoffs, and then makes the decision a lot simpler. But I don't see that happening with how he's played this year. He's been very, very good, a top 10 or so quarterback in football this year. I don't know that many people would argue that. So it's been incredible how he's been able to revive his career. And if it's not in Minnesota, he's going to get a contract somewhere else, and he's going to be a starter next year at probably a decent price point. That's going to shock a lot of people.
Another weird stat line on the season, you look at Geno Smith, who has thrown for more yards than any quarterback in the NFL this season. And he's only thrown for, he's thrown for almost 3,500 yards. He's completing 69.5% of his passes. He's thrown 12 picks and 14 touchdowns. When you have all those, that offense doesn't make any sense to me. They're 8-5. They're coming off a win yesterday over the Cardinals. I've always been a fan. I've liked Geno. I love this Seahawks wide receiver core as well. But when you look at the weapons Geno has and you look at the numbers that he has thrown for, but then the touchdowns and the interceptions, those just contradict what you're seeing. And you look at the weapons on the field, the Seahawks might be the strangest team offensively in the entire NFL because nothing makes sense. When you look at that production from Geno, but then you look at the scoring production from the offense with the weapons they have, and they have a good running back, it doesn't make sense what the Seattle Seahawks are doing. I know they're 8-5, but I feel like they're leaving a lot of meat on that bone. I think this could be an elite team in football, and they're just okay because they're not able to maximize the yardage that's being put up by Geno at this point.
Yeah, no, they're a really good football team, and the question has always been, can Geno protect the football? And that's been the issue for them this year. 14 touchdowns, 12 interceptions on the season for Geno Smith, and that's what's been biting them a lot this season. And if he can protect the football with the way Jackson Smith and Jigba has continued to grow and kind of just slide into that Tyler Lockett role seamlessly as he continues to age and kind of phase out of that offense, it's been perfect, a perfect recipe for Seattle. And it's been awesome to see that happen in the backfield's coming together with Walker and Charbonnet. It's been really, really cool to see. In the defense with Mike McDonald, I have faith in that team top to bottom. I just don't know if it's going to happen this year. I always think they've been an elite quarterback away, even though the yards are there for Geno Smith.
Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll be right back. And we are back. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister in the producer chair, Jacob Tissett with you here. 1410 ESPN Radio, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. We opened up the show, instant reaction. The 12-team college football playoff field is officially set. No more wondering what it's going to be. We now know what it is. We now know that the first-round matchups on December 20th and December 21st, Indiana at Notre Dame, SMU at Penn State, Clemson at Texas, and Tennessee at Ohio State. So for you sports bettors out there, Ohio State at home, 8 o'clock kickoff at night. They are a 7.5-point favorite, according to ESPN Bet. Texas, an 11-point favorite with Clemson coming to town. Penn State, a 9-point favorite with SMU on the road. And then Notre Dame at home, an 8-point favorite against Indiana. Are you surprised that line is as close as it is?
I'm not, and the only reason I'm not is because I don't think we've really seen Notre Dame play anyone this year. I know they have the ranked wins over the service academies, but I don't know what that really tells you. I think this is giving Indiana maybe a little too much credit, but I don't know. I'm not exactly jumping on this Notre Dame spread, even though I know a lot of people are. The number I was really shocked about was Ohio State minus 7.5. Against Tennessee. That seems really, really steep to me. I think Tennessee's a really good team that can do a lot of the things that Michigan did well against Ohio State really, really well. So that matchup does scare me quite a bit up in Columbus, and I wonder how that one's going to go. A touchdown and a half seems crazy, but in terms of Texas, the third one, that seems pretty easy to me as well, even though it's minus 11.
Ohio State 2-13 against SEC teams in bowl games. The worst record in college football history against the SEC in bowl games. That's kind of a wild stat when it's all said and done. And then like Urban struggled to get. I mean, I know he has the win over Alabama there, but like whether it was Urban, whether it was Tressel, whether it's Day, that is a wild stat. That is the case at this point. Ryan Day though 0-3 all time against the SEC, losing to Alabama in the national championship. Obviously lost, to Georgia in the semifinals last year, and then I was trying to figure out what the other one was, but Missouri last year. In that meaningless bowl game, nonetheless. But again, you have Ryan Day in his struggles against the SEC, but Tennessee has to come play in Columbus in the cold in December. Those are those are two narratives that will collide. I'm curious to see how that's going to pan out. You know, the Mason-Dixon line that everyone likes to talk about, we're going to find out with Tennessee. We'll see what happens. So, real quick, last thing on college football here. Devin Brown, Ohio State quarterback, has entered the transfer portal. It is interesting. There's been a lot of starters on some playoff teams. And I know he's not a starter, but there's been a lot of big names, I should say, on playoff teams that have entered the portal. Right now, you should be focusing on helping your team win a national championship. And this isn't necessarily against the players. It's just the way the calendar is set up. It's done so incorrectly. You have players leaving their current playoff and national championship contending teams because they got to do what's best for them. They're being put in position to be selfish. But yeah, Devin Brown has entered the transfer portal, and that won't be the last of these kind of names that we're going to see over the next couple of days, including today and what we've already seen as of late.
Right. Devin Brown doing an honorable thing, I think, in this whole new world of college football, and he will stay with the Buckeyes through playoff prep. So he's going to practice with the Buckeyes, do scout team stuff for the Buckeyes while still entering the transfer portal now and getting his name out there and getting recruited by other schools. So I think that's a really, really good thing for these players to do, or at least explore the opportunity of doing that. Especially if you're in the playoff, because I think it's important to not throw your team under the bus. I know that you're not necessarily a starter probably if you're transferring at this point in the season, but all these guys and these bodies are still really important to run scout team reps and practice and get prepared for games. So all these people leaving the portal do have massive impacts on these teams in terms of preparation aspects, not just their impact in the game on the stat sheet. So every time you see a player from one of these playoff teams enter the portal, you got to think about how it could affect them down the line. But yeah, it's certainly a problem, and I don't like how college football is trending. This is a major issue. I don't think the portal should be open until after the playoff. I think every school should be done with their season before players that are on active rosters are allowed to transfer. But Devin Brown famously said last year that if you left when you lost your job and just ran away, that you were a coward. And he talked about a lot of the Ohio State guys on the roster that left without competing and called them cowards. Well, he certainly didn't do that. He came back this year. He fought for his job. He lost his job to Will Howard, and now he's taking his last couple of years of eligibility elsewhere. I think this is a massive, massive sign for Ohio State fans in terms of the trajectory of Julian Sayin, the 5-star recruit, #1 quarterback in last year's class. I think if he hadn't blown the socks off some people, or at least shown massive steps of improvement this season, I don't think Devin Brown's jumping in the portal, especially this early. I think he's waiting to see how that fight might go, how that QB battle might go. But if you think Sayin's head and shoulders above Brown already, or at least close, then you have to assume that it's going to be another couple steps forward by the spring. So hopefully that's what this is, and I'm not just reading too far into it, but I'm a huge Julian Sayin believer. I know a lot of people have turned the page on Will Howard to Tavian St. Clair, and that's going to be really exciting. A guy from the Columbus area going to play for the Buckeyes, one of the highest-rated quarterbacks in the entire country. But we have another guy in the building right now that's pretty dang good, and he was the #1 quarterback last year. And I think Julian Sayin's going to be really, really good for the Buckeyes over the next 2 years. And I think this Devin Brown transfer is the start of what exactly he could be.
Yeah, Devin Brown, could he be going to Syracuse? I mean, that seemed to work out pretty well for the last guy.
Yeah,
that's
Fran Brown just stays in the Buckeye pipeline.
And keep thanking Ryan Day. You know, they seem to be along a lot of they're very thankful for one another when it's all said and done. As far as, the bowl games coming up too, I did think it was pretty cool. People like to beat up on Colorado and Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. I mean, obviously a very arrogant and cocky program. I'm not for me, they're not hard to root for. I could pull for, but I get why people say they're hard to root for. I do want to make sure we highlight the fact that they are playing in a meaningless bowl game. I don't even know what bowl game it is. I don't even know who they're playing. I know
this is actually interesting, and I kind of wanted to talk about it because they're playing BYU.
Let's use it.
Okay.
Oh, well, then let's pick up with this because there's a cool little transition into Joe Burrow that we'll use to come out of this as well when we come back. So I want to talk about Shedeur and Travis Hunter when we come back, and then of course they are playing BYU. I didn't realize that. I didn't even pay attention to see who they were playing in their meaningless bowl game, or is it meaningless? We'll find out when we come back. More Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We got Casey McAllister in the producer chair. Elliot will return to the show tomorrow. We're excited to be with you here on a Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. We talked briefly about the transfer portal. Devin Brown, Ohio State quarterback, entered the transfer portal. That's not huge news, but again, Ohio State's in the playoff, and they're focusing on trying to win a national championship. And there's a lot of players like him that aren't starters but are really talented and have the ability to start and play elsewhere. And this puts these players in a tough spot because people are they're saying that they're selfish, that it's a distraction and all this. And I'm like, well, the players, if they're good teammates and continue to their backup role the rest of the way, then they lose out on all of the transfer portal and NIL opportunities that exist out there. It's a very tough spot for these guys to be in because you'll get bit in the behind if you're loyal, and then you get criticized if you enter the portal when your team's preparing for a playoff. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't at this point. But with all that being said, we love to criticize athletes all the time, or that seems to be the popular thing to do when they bail on their team, as the narrative is usually formed that way. But I do want to give a shout out Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, who they're not in the playoff. They are considered egotistical and selfish players, right? Like that's what the vibe seems to be about these two. I think it's really cool, and I want to highlight the fact that I would support any athlete that does not play in bowl games because I do think they're meaningless exhibition games. But if I support that they don't do it, I'm also really impressed with those who put their team first, who do decide that, hey, this is our last opportunity to put this jersey on and go out there and play for the fans. So I do think it's neat. Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders will both play in their bowl game against, as Jacob said, BYU, something I never really processed. Jake, I didn't even consider what you told me during the break about this matchup. It didn't even stand out to me. I'll let you take it from here, but something you're not a fan of about this bowl game matchup for Colorado.
Yeah. It's just the intricacies of college football and kind of the ripple effects down the line of these realignments and the expansion of the playoffs and all that stuff. We have two Big 12 teams here playing each other in a bowl game, BYU and Colorado, two teams that up until the last week of the season were alive for the Big 12 championship. Now playing each other in, as Justin said, a meaningless bowl game. Two Big 12 teams, and you might ask yourself, why is that? That doesn't make any sense. You can't play your own conference in a bowl game. Well, it's because Pac-12 auto bids carried over. So a lot of these bowls that were originally tied to the Pac-12 conference, the Conference of Champions, as Bill Walton would say, they still had their bids aligned with the Pac-12. So you weren't able to pick a lot of the Pac-12 teams, or former Pac-12 teams, I should say, if you had, say, a Big 12 bid. Those bids, like the Pop-Tart Bowl. The Pop-Tart Bowl went with Iowa State, which they always were going to because Iowa State finished second in the Big 12 championship. But had that been Clemson, the Pop-Tart Bowl wouldn't have been able to, or not Clemson, had that been Colorado, the Pop-Tart Bowl wouldn't have been able to pick Colorado because they are still aligned with the Pac-12 bids. And that's what happened here, a Big 12 Pac-12 matchup between Colorado and BYU, technically, according to the bids. Just crazy to see that this hasn't been ironed out with a conference that's gone underwater. It's unbelievable to see that money still holds these bids, in fact.
Yeah, and we hear the Rose Bowl, for instance. The Rose Bowl will be a part of the playoff moving forward, so this really won't get mentioned too much. But the big thing about the Rose Bowl is the 14 playoff took over in tradition. Tradition's been put aside for these money-making opportunities for football for decades now, but they still kept trying to force the tradition of the Rose Bowl in regards to, I remember years ago, Ohio State missed the playoff, and they got paired up with Utah. And look, Cam Rising, and they had really good players there. That was the breakout game for Jackson Smith and Jigba for Ohio State. That's a very good matchup, technically, Ohio State-Utah, but it wasn't a sexy brand matchup. And if you want people to tune in to a meaningless exhibition bowl game, and even though it is the Rose Bowl, and we may disagree on this, Jake, I've never asked you your take on it, but I was mad that year about the Utah matchup because I'm like, hey, don't give me we have to take Ohio State and Utah and pair them together because it's the tradition of the Rose Bowl. Well, you ignore the tradition of the Rose Bowl anytime the bowl game is next up in the rotation for the 14 playoff during that stretch. So you pick and choose when that. Give the fans the best matchups possible. Now, it ended up being a very good game, so I was technically wrong there. But people want a good brand matchup. Alabama and Michigan, all right, they got paired together in a bowl game this coming. I'm going to watch that. I mean, Alabama versus Michigan, that just sounds like a good game. If the game means absolutely nothing, you might as well put two brands together that is going to be a heavyweight matchup, and you're going to want to tune in to watch it. But I hate when you just force feed some of these matchups because of tradition of these bowl games in the past. I can't stand it. these bowl games don't mean anything, but at least give us a reason to watch. Pair up good teams. BYU and Colorado. Colorado's the draw, but I have no interest in Colorado BYU at this point, so we'll see what happens. But I did, like I said, Shedeur and Travis Hunter. By the way, thumbs up, thumbs down to them playing. Is it stupid of them to play? Should they be playing?
Huge round of applause to Deion Sanders. I don't critique any first-round pick that chooses to protect themselves and sit out. I think that's a decision they can make on their own. If they want to protect themselves in a game that they choose not to care about, that's completely fine. But I do give massive, massive props to the coaches that have built a culture that establishes a set of rules and goals that these guys want to live up to, in which that their star players, especially two guys who are going to be top 5 picks, are going to play in the game, in a bowl game that it evidently doesn't matter in the new format of college football. So I think I've been a Colorado hater, a Deion hater, a Shedeur hater, a lot of steps along the way. But these two guys playing in this bowl game tells you that he's building something for real in Boulder, and this culture is legit, and these guys want to play for him. And playing for Colorado actually does mean something. It's not all just a show for clicks and views and ESPN and all that good stuff. So Deion's building something for real. I think we kind of saw that as well when Julian Lewis committed there, the top quarterback in next year's class. So I think that's going up and up more and more in Colorado as long as Deion doesn't go to the NFL. This is just another blip along that radar that tells you that.
Yeah, a lot of these commits that are these players that are about to go to the draft, and you're going to be drafted, you're going to be a top draft pick, and there's a lot of money on the line. Playing in a meaningless game, you are putting a lot on the line. And people bring up the fact that, well, there's insurance for that. Okay, the insurance covers a one-time payout. If you have a freak injury and you never play football again, that obviously that insurance will cover that one-time payment. And look, they won't be – they're going to be given a nice little lump sum of money, but there's still so much money left on the table from a potential career-ending injury that these guys are risking going out there. So kudos to them for being willing to do that. But college isn't the only place that athletes have to make that type of decision on, a business decision to go, in on it for themselves. I'm looking at the NFL standings right now, and I see that, we joked earlier, like the Browns have officially been eliminated from the playoffs, as has Jacksonville and the Jets and the Titans, Patriots, and Raiders. Cincinnati has not officially been eliminated from the playoffs, but, even before they've officially been eliminated, and they may still go on a run. The season's not done, but they don't have that E in front of it. But, Jacob, you've shared your thoughts on this. There's a lot of people that want Joe Burrow to shut it down. They don't. Yeah. These games are meaningless moving forward. You are not playing for anything. Like, they still technically are playing for the playoffs right now. They haven't been eliminated. But if you lose tonight and get that E put in front of your name, there are decisions that have to be made. Do you play Joe Burrow? Teams are going. They're going to keep playing him. He's going to want to play. He's come out as much last week and said how important it is because of the time that he has missed. He knows how valuable it is to be out there on the field, and he doesn't take it for granted. I thought that was a cool thing because so many times athletes are looking out just for themselves. Joe Burrow knows the significance of how important it is to be out there for his teammates. But we also know every time he's out there in a meaningless game, when you're not playing for anything other than what? Like you're almost working against your draft order at that point. I understand why a player like Joe Burrow would shut it down if you're not playing for anything, but I thought that was also cool of him to come out and say, hey, I'm not shutting it down. He's not going to take for granted, being healthy and having an opportunity to go out there. But I also understand, just like in college, you don't want them to risk future injury to lose them money moving forward. Same thing. Even though Joe Burrow is paid, it could still cost him and his team a lot every time he steps foot out there in meaningless games. Hopefully that's not the case. We'll talk more about the Cowboys matchup later. But I did think that was interesting that Joe Burrow acknowledged that and even attacked the fans like you that basically said it was silly for anyone to suggest that he should sit out the rest of the year, Jacob.
Yeah, fair. No, that's fair. I like that he has that sentiment, and we knew it was never going to happen. That's not something that's going to happen, especially with a star player like Joe Burrow to bench him. But I also don't understand the fans that are like, we shouldn't. Bengals are better than tanking. This franchise shouldn't stoop to the level to tank. It's, do you want to win or do you not want to win? I think whether you think Joe Burrow should be benched or not for memories and stats and all that stuff, we can all agree that picking higher in the draft gives the Bengals a better chance at winning in the future. So I think that would certainly make sense to tank, but with great players and winners on your staff, that's not something that's easy to sell.
The do-gooders, my favorite. My favorite people. That we're above tanking. How the hell do you think you got Burrow?
They almost screwed that up by not tanking.
And they did. Well, and then see, that's the thing too. I remember making people mad about that as well. They weren't technically tanking that year. They were just straight up bad. They weren't trying, just like this year. You're not trying to lose. Like, that's actually kind of scary, and this is going to make make myself vulnerable to getting ripped in the chat. So I'm sorry. But sometimes that is, I wasn't even planning this, but like I remember that year that they got Burrow. They were not supposed to be a bad team that year. They were not supposed to be horrible that year. They were not supposed to be a team picking at the top of the draft. And, regularly, too often in Cincinnati, when you end up having these really, really bad seasons, you're not even trying. This season was supposed to be a Super Bowl contending season, not fighting for a draft pick contending season. So that is unfortunate that that's the case. But yeah, sometimes though tanking, that's why the draft talk that we had the offseason that everyone ripped me for. I was trying to eliminate that. I hate when teams tank, to be honest. I think that it's crazy to incentivize losing. But as long as incentivizing losing as long as that exists in sports, teams, of course, are going to tank. And they're not going to say, hey, guys, we're not trying to win. Joe Burrow, you're done for the year. But if Joe Burrow all of a sudden has a little sore leg, all right, they're going to be extra cautious with it. They're not going to throw him out. I saw Jamar was on the injury list from earlier in the week. If you're eliminated, does Jamar's going to be a little bit more patient with that injury now that you're eliminated from the playoffs than you were earlier in the year when you're still contending and think that you have a shot. Yeah. So sometimes that's tanking. Tanking isn't, we're going to go out there and try and lose. But now moving forward, you're not going to do everything in your power to force Joe Burrow out on that field if he's not physically capable. Same thing with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, or anybody else. Like Trevor Lawrence, I didn't read too much into the significance of his injury. Maybe you did, Jake, but I feel like they probably could have nursed him back to health to get him out there. But at the same time, what's the point? Get home, get healthy, see you next year. Basically what they did there.
Yeah, I think that's since that being a head injury, I think that's just kind of what's this next 4 weeks for? He'd only be able to play 2 of them anyway after being on IR. There's no reason to bring him back for those last 2 games if you're already out of it. I think that's certainly the point that I think this becomes a little bit more real is if any little injuries come up. I think we're seeing that with Orlando Brown now. I'm not necessarily saying that he could play today. The film against the Steelers last Sunday certainly lent itself to guess that he could not play this week. But to shut him down for this week, and in my opinion, hopefully for the rest of the season after what we saw against the Steelers, he's just not ready to play. And that's not to say that he won't be at some point this year. But I think if these guys are dinged up, that's when you shut him down. Because when you're trying to fight through injuries, that's when you overcompensate in different parts of your body. And that's when you just leave yourself vulnerable to getting hurt even more. So, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to play these guys just simply because they won't let you bench them when they're healthy and ready to go. But yeah, if Jamar Chase's ankle injury wasn't off the injury report, or if Joe Burrow takes a nasty hit and is flexing that wrist a little too many times, I don't know what it's going to be. But if anything like that does pop up, and it's not just those 2 guys. I mean, if Chase Brown gets hurt, we're asking him to carry the ball an awful lot in a season that's lost with no backup running back when he's a guy that you're banking on being your lead back for at least the rest of this window in the near future. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I think if these guys start to get banged up at all, that's when this conversation reopens itself. But in terms of Burrow and Chase, they both shut that down over the weekend.
With that being said, again, Chatterbox Bengals tonight, correct? You'll be live.
Yes, tonight. I was about to say no because it's Monday, but absolutely. Game kickoff to post game. Me and old Craigo hopping in post game to bring you the instant recap. So hopefully a win. And if you guys want, I'll watch the Simpsons broadcast if you guys want me to. So that'll just be up to you guys when we get in the chat later. So that'll be a fun time. And if it starts going poorly, we'll certainly switch it over there. So it'll be fun in the chat. Make sure everyone joins in Chatterbox Sports YouTube tonight at about 8:15 for the kickoff of Bengals Cowboys.
We talked lightly about how to handle some injuries moving forward. Do you want to be more cautious? I haven't looked. What does the injury report look like heading in to tonight? Is everyone, not everyone, but like your Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, everyone? You talked about Orlando Brown Jr. a little bit. What's that look like heading into this matchup tonight with Dallas?
The big ones on both sides were removed from the injury report. Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb were on the injury report earlier this week. Both wide receivers have been removed. Looks like they're going to be okay. T. Higgins was limited in practice all week long, but he has been since he came back from this injury. It's nothing new. Certainly expect him to play this week. Would be shocked if anything went against him there. Nothing else really jumps off the page for the Bengals except Sheldon Rankins still out with that illness. This is going on 3 full weeks now out with an illness. And I've been, banging on Sheldon Rankins and that contract and how he's probably a cut candidate all year long. But when you're out this long with an illness, I start at least asking some questions about whether or not he's okay. So certainly some questions to be asked there about an illness keeping you out of an NFL season for 3+ weeks. That just seems like a really, really long time. And hope everything's all right with Rankins. Orlando Brown not going to play, as I touched on earlier in this segment, and then Logan Wilson on IR out for the year as well earlier this week. Those really the only big things that popped up. Cody Ford on the injury report, but was a full participant. Amarius Mims again on the injury report earlier this week, but was removed later in the week. It's going to be interesting to see how they shuffle this offensive line with Orlando Brown out. Cody Ford moved to guard, bumped Volson to the bench last week with Orlando Brown's return. Now with Brown out again, I have to assume Ford's going to move back to tackle, bring Volson back off the bench. A lot of fans asking for Matt Lee at center, bumping Ted Karras over to guard instead of bringing Volson back off the bench. I'm not sure what the answer is going to be, but if I had to guess, it's going to be Ford at tackle, Volson back in at guard tonight.
That Sheldon Rankins thing, it's like that's one of those weird situations where, and I'm definitely urging fans to question the severity, or not question the severity of it, but the legitimacy of it. But, I did see someone say, well, if it'd be kind of interesting if the Bengals run the playoff hunt, I bet he would be out there. I would like to agree with that, but let's be clear. I know the Bengals' losses have piled up over the last couple of weeks, but he's been missing games even when they were mathematically very much in the hunt. When they were within a game or two, he's been missing games.
He's also very loudly being considered a cut candidate and therefore on a 1-year contract and going to be a free agent next year. I don't think it benefits Sheldon Rankins in any way, shape, or form to miss games, much less against the Cowboys, who have one of the worst offensive lines in football. Maybe you can pad your stats like he did last year against the Bengals. That's something a lot of people forget. Half of his sacks last year came in one game against the Bengals.
All right, well, we'll have more Bengals later on in the show to close out the program today. We'll go 3 and out with Jacob later on. 3 reasons he feels confident about the Bengals' ability to come out with the win later tonight, and then 3 reasons he's a little concerned about this matchup with the Dallas Cowboys. We'll get to that later on. Let's transition over to baseball. When we come back, we don't have to wait anymore to find out where Soto is going to go. We knew it was either going to be in New York or is it going to be in L.A. We knew it was going to be somewhere where they like to call that big market, right? So we know he's in New York. The amount of money that they paid to get him to stay in New York, not with the Yankees, but with the Mets, has everybody talking today. Plus, the Dodgers president comes out and basically has one interesting, basically response to people that say that big contracts are ruining baseball. Even the Dodgers are ruining baseball. We'll talk about all of that when we come back. Plus, Cincinnati Reds. Last week, we talked about the possibility of Jesse Winker reuniting with the Reds. We talked about Garrett Crochet, the star pitcher for the White Sox, the Reds being in on him. You could add a couple other big names that could help them in the lineup and out defensively in the outfield. We'll talk about all of that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. Well, the Mets, they did their best to keep Soto in New York. Soto stays in New York, no longer a Yankee. But he'll just wear a different jersey next year. Now a Met, and will be a Met for a long, long time. 15 years, to be exact. $765 million. That is the deal for Soto to keep him in New York for 15 years. A 15-year, $765 million contract. These contracts just keep getting bigger, and every time these contracts come out, we sound surprised. And then 2 years from now, we're going to look back at this little Soto contract and think, man, the Mets got a steal compared to whatever next big player, probably Ellie. So that's where we're at right now. thoughts when that kid? I'm not surprised that he's with the Mets. Should we be surprised by the number? The number seems to be what everyone's talking about, Jacob.
So 15 years, 765, and that's assuming they want to let Juan Soto leave after 5 years, because if they want to avoid Juan Soto's opt-out and keep the last 10 years on that deal, it raises the last 10 years of that deal to $55 million, which brings him to an $805 million contract if that void is used. So the biggest contract in professional sports history. And it might be crazy to say because he's young and he's one of the best hitters in baseball. He just put up 125 walk, 40 home run season, which is unbelievable. He's the first player to ever do that and then hit the open market. So, of course, he's going to hit a record-breaking contract. But this is crazy to me. It seems like an overpay for a guy who only plays one side of the ball. I was okay with signing Shohei to $700 million with the expectation that he's going to pitch, and be one of the best hitters in baseball. I think that made that contract make sense. But to give Soto, $800 effectively to only play the field and bat, that's crazy to me. He's just not going to help your team win that much, at least in my opinion. And it seems a little wild to give this kind of contract. But I'm also talking about it in terms of these teams operating with a limited number of funds, which I guess the Mets are not. So it's not an overpay if it doesn't affect how much you can spend on other pieces of your roster and bolster this team. And if Steve Cohen can pay, $800 million and have it just roll off his back, like when me and you buy a new bowl at Chipotle, I don't think it's a big deal for them if they're going to bolster this roster around Juan Soto and be a World Series contender. But if this is the big move and you're walking out basically not that there's a bigger move out there, but if this is the move and you're walking out a pitching rotation, which with Clay Holmes being a converted starter and then Juan Soto making $800 million in the outfield, that's I don't know that that's necessarily a recipe for success. The Mets need to be committed to putting the rest of the team, or to improving the rest of the team around him as well. You have two MVP candidates, perennial MVP candidates in Soto and Lindor. Now you got to build up the rest of that roster a little bit. And they have good young pieces. Interested to see if they'll bring Pete Alonso back. I assume they would with a move like this. Why would you let another star player leave if money's no object? So I would expect they bring Pete Alonso back as well, and this Mets team looks pretty scary. It's exciting to see him go somewhere else. I know the Mets have had a high payroll like all these other teams for many, many years now, but it's just something different about the Yankees and the Dodgers. For him to end up with the Mets, I know they're the same thing, the same big market, deep pocket team, but it's just something that makes it feel like a little bit of a win for everyone else, that he's not a Yankee or a Dodger. But the funniest thing that I saw going on with all this, Kinner, and I want to know if you had the same thoughts. As soon as it was announced that Soto signed with the Mets, the first thing that I saw basically everywhere were Yankees fans, because we know there's more of them and they're louder than any other fan base in the entire world. There were Yankees fans everywhere saying, oh my gosh, $765 million for Juan Soto? What a terrible overpay. That's not going to work out at all. It's reported about 10 minutes later the Yankees offered him $760. Yankees fans complaining about this being a massive overpay for a guy that you offered the same contract. What are we doing, guys? I know fan bases always have to cope, but for these big teams with deep pockets, there is, I guess, no such thing as an overpay. So it's a good move for the Mets. Yankees fans are going to have to find a way to get over it, but it's nice to see the Yankees not just get everyone they want. This is a good change of pace.
So in other sports, Browns obviously heavily overpaid for their quarterback. You can question the Jaguars overpaying for their quarterback. And this happens in every sport. You look in, the NBA, we question overpays for, there was for Tatum. Now Tatum's turned into an elite NBA star, but there was a stretch where there just seemed like something was missing. And, there was talks of at that time, him getting the richest contract in NBA history. And you looked at Jason Tatum and, well, now he's an NBA champion, so it all worked out. This happens in every sport where we talk about overpay. But this, to me, it's not like this is overpay, because I just look at Soto and I'm just like, I'm underwhelmed. And I know that sounds weird because the production is through the roof. All right. The production I'm not underwhelmed by, but I look at Soto and I just think he's an elite hitter. And I just don't put that in that category for the money that he got paid. When I looked at, and some of this might be a little repetitive, but you look at Shohei Ohtani probably got underpaid as wild as that sounds. People were talking about how much money he got. He is it's unprecedented. He is a top 5 pitcher in baseball and a top 5 hitter in baseball. And he got underpaid. And you're getting paid roughly the same amount as Soto, who just is an elite hitter. And I don't want to undervalue that, but I am going to undervalue the production to the pay that he got. I just think that it is not impossible to find a Juan Soto in Major League Baseball. So to overpay to get him is just wild to me. It's almost impossible to find a talent like Shohei Ohtani. Whatever he got, he should have got more. The other thing I keep thinking about is I look at Elly De La Cruz, and this worries me because obviously when Ellys do, the market will be significantly higher and he'll get paid way more, and he might have just been priced out of Cincinnati.
Same age.
But here's the deal. Boris, you could get one over on him. That's going to be a tough one. I'm glad Francona's with this organization because there's at least a baseball mind that might be able to kind of balance that Boris negotiation out a bit, right? But no, I look at this. If it came out today that Elly De La Cruz got that same deal, I would say he's worth every penny. And here's why. Elly, is he the best with the bat in his hand power-wise? No, but he can hit the ball to the ballpark. He can put the ball in play. When he gets on base, it's a whole other ball game when he gets on base. He brings so much more to the table than Juan Soto does, in my opinion. I'm not a homer with Elly. Elly De La Cruz and Shohei Ohtani are the 2 most unique talents in baseball, if you ask me right now. It has nothing to do with him being a Red. There's no one else in the league like Elly. There's no one else in the league like Shohei Ohtani. What Soto brings to the table, you can go pull on a lot of other players that would have the same kind of impact. Same type of numbers, maybe not, but same type of impact. I don't know. I don't think there's I think there's a lot of players that you can go get that you can replicate that production. You can't replicate Elly De La Cruz, and I don't think you could, and I know you can't replicate Shohei Ohtani. I have a huge problem with this contract because it's a bad precedent to set moving forward. Shohei's deal was based on having basically two superstar skill sets brought to the table for one player. Soto's just a one superstar skill set for one player, and he got paid for 2. I'm not a fan of that at all. It's a bad precedent moving forward, but oh well. We're just a fan of a small market team that doesn't have a chance in this anyway, so who cares? But not a fan of it. Not a fan of it.
I certainly agree that I think it's an overpay and he wasn't worth, $700 and whatever $1 million, but I can't agree with you that you can go find another Juan Soto. I don't think there's another Juan Soto out there. I don't think there's maybe been a Juan Soto in a long time. The fact that he's, just 26 years old, already with over 35 WAR in his career. He's playing at an unbelievably level year in and year out. He's hitting 285 for his career. I think this guy is a generational talent. And if you're going to pay anyone in the league this money right now, I think it's him after Shohei Ohtani. If you're going to pay any position player this kind of contract, I think it is Juan Soto. So I think in that sense, I definitely agree with the contract in terms of him being the second biggest one. But the fact that he passed Shohei and the 15 years and all the money, it does seem crazy to me. And also another thing we're not really touching on here, Juan Soto's not a great defender. He's going to be a DH for probably, at the very least, the last decade of that deal, which means from 2020 or from 2030 to 2040, we're going to have 2 DHs in MLB making $50 million a piece. So just crazy to see Shohei and Juan Soto get these deals as DHs, at least on the offensive side of the ball, if you're projecting.
Yeah, and I guess when I said you can go out and get, that's why I said statistically there's not a lot of other Sotos out there. But you can go get a position player that is going to bring a lot to the table offensively. Yeah. And is the gap between to me, the money you save on going to get the gap player, the player that isn't matching what his offensive numbers are, but production and offensive, and do you agree with this, that your offensive numbers and your production are 2 different things? Because I just watched the Yankees lose a World Series with Aaron Judge and this same Soto, and the production, the numbers are there, but production where you have an impact on a game. I'm not saying he doesn't have the impact on the game, and I know Ward is going to be brought up as well in this conversation, but Elly, to me, Elly can single-handedly take over a game. Can Soto do that? I don't know. Elly when Ellie's on that field in any capacity, you mentioned Soto's limitations defensively. I look at what Elly can do defensively. I like what he can do with the bat in his hand. I like what he can do when he gets actually out on the base paths. Elly has single-handedly won the Reds games by himself last year in these overwhelming, statistical games that we were just watching this in awe. I don't think I've ever watched Soto and been in awe. I think statistically, I'm in awe when I see his numbers. I don't watch Soto and think, oh my gosh, look at that guy. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but that's just how I feel when I watch Soto. I don't get that, oh my gosh, feel. I get that with Shohei. I get that with Ellie. I even get that with Judge. Judge is like an overwhelming. He has that charisma. He has that look to him. Soto's just kind of there. I don't know. I'm just not a Soto guy. I don't know why. But statistically, I can't debate you on that. One of the best in baseball, no doubt.
I think Soto's 10 times the player Judge is. And like not even remotely close to Aaron Judge.
No. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. My bad. Keep going.
No, you're good. I think Juan Soto is distantly head and shoulders above every other positional player in baseball right now. Distantly. In terms of when you account age with what he's been able to do already. And I'll throw in the wow factor. I think if I talk about plays outside of the Reds in my lifetime that jump out to me as wow factor, there's a couple Juan Soto ones, mostly from that Nationals run, but that's the deepest run he had in the playoffs that I remember right away. I think Juan Soto is definitely a wow player. And the other thing is, you have to. What are we doing with Ellie right now? Basically, in this conversation, we're projecting growth. We're projecting that the errors and the strikeouts and the power will increase. Those two will decrease, and the power will increase, and he's going to be a better player in the future. Juan Soto's 26. Can we project growth for Juan Soto too?
That's fair.
What happens if he gets better?
I'm not giving him that like I said earlier, I'm not trying to do the homer thing, but I think I'm more emotionally invested in Ellie than Soto, sure. So that's probably when that's coming from. But yeah, that 26 years old, 15-year contract, 10 years from now, he's going to be significantly better potentially than what he is right now even. So from that standpoint, okay, fair. But yeah.
I also think it's perfect timing for Juan Soto. You produce as much as anyone maybe ever has in the current model of contracts before you're eligible for free agency. You go to the Padres, a big market filled with stars after the Nationals in a trade, and you perform pretty well. Then you go to the Yankees, a bigger market with bigger stars. In your last year, you go to the World Series, and all of this is coming the offseason after Shohei Ohtani just reset the market in terms of contracts. It's perfect timing for Juan Soto to be a once in a lifetime kind of player in terms of the timeline of the contracts, being a free agent at 26 years old, his production at this point in his career and the timing after Shohei, and not really having another marquee player on the market. Every single player on the market basically is holding their breath waiting for Juan Soto, and then they're going to go based on that, the Teoscar Hernandez, the Anthony Santander's of the world. So this is going to be game-changing for the entire offseason, all the contracts even bigger than Soto. I think this going as high as it did with the Mets, I think is going to raise the contracts for all those outfielders across the country and probably price the Reds out of a couple of those high-end guys, if I had to guess.
Painful. But speaking of these big contracts, on the Jim Rome show, the president for the Los Angeles Dodgers, Andrew Friedman, he was asked he was a guest on the Jim Rome show, and he was asked about the narrative out there that big contracts. And now this is about the Dodgers, but it's basically the same concept with Soto getting this big number. It's the same teams getting and absorbing these big contracts and players all over the place. So Andrew Friedman was asked on the Jim Rome show about the idea that LA, the Dodgers, and their signings, that they're ruining baseball. Here's Andrew Friedman's response on the Jim Rome show.
From the moment I got here has been incredibly consistent with the civic responsibility that we have to our fans and that partnership that we have with our fans. So I got asked the other day after the Blake Snell press conference, hey, what do you think about, other fans and other teams, saying that you guys are ruining baseball? And we don't think about that at all. We think about the responsibility we have to our fans. They show up every night. They show up on the road. The passion they have for this team, we feel immense pressure to deliver for them. And thus the virtuous cycle of the Dodgers and our fans and how intertwined those things are really are front of mind for our ownership group. And it's about continuing to reinvest and continue to make this, in our minds, what we are shooting for is to make this a golden era of Dodger baseball. And Romy, as you know, that's a high bar, but that's what we're shooting for.
I wanted to hate that response. I really did. When I was initially just saw the tweet, I was like, oh, what's this elitist guy going to say? It's going to be very self-righteous, this, that, and the other. But then when I heard the response, he's saying what I would want Nick Kroll to say. He's saying what I would want the Castellinis to say. He's saying what I would want any front office personnel of any team that I follow to say. And I applaud what he said. Basically, we have a responsibility to our fans.
Yeah.
Major League Baseball is not his responsibility. Major League Baseball is not the Dodgers' responsibility. It's not the Yankees' responsibility or the Mets' responsibility. At the end of the day, I do want to completely pivot because I have said, man, the Dodgers are ruining. I've believed that. And the Dodgers, they're killing baseball. Just like people thought the Yankees were killing baseball in the 90s and the 2000s. And I'm not a big fan of this Soto deal money-wise, in that these deals are killing baseball. But at the end of the day, good for the Mets. The Mets had one responsibility, and that was to their organization and to their fan base, and their fans are ecstatic today. The Dodgers fans, they never feel slighted. They never feel like us questioning our front office personnel and our ownership, right? I thought that was actually a very well-put response. They have a responsibility to their fans and their fans only. I will no longer say that the Dodgers are ruining baseball. Baseball is ruining baseball by not getting a stranglehold of the salary cap conversation. Or, Jake, you've turned my thought on this towards the salary floor. The Castellinis and the Pirates ownership and others, they have done more to hurt baseball than the Dodgers ownership. Paying players and getting the best and stacking your roster, that's done for your fans and your organization only. It's jealousy. If you're mad at the Dodgers or the Yankees for that, that's jealousy. You should be mad at your team, not mad at the Dodgers. I am no longer going to blame the Dodgers for ruining baseball. I thought that was a great response. I was the president of operations for the Dodgers. I thought that was a pretty cool response, and it totally changed how I view that. The Dodgers are not ruining baseball. Baseball is ruining baseball. And honestly, the Castellinis and the Pirates and the other teams that refuse to spend are ruining baseball more than the other way around.
You had me for the most part. I was going to agree with you, and then you said that we have to blame the small market teams for ruining baseball. I think baseball is ruining baseball. MLB is the one that's to blame. Rob Manfred's the one to blame. The people at the top that aren't doing anything about the spending discrepancies are the ones to blame. But without a salary cap or a salary floor, Bob Castellini simply can't bid. There were 5 teams in the Juan Soto sweepstakes that bid higher than his net worth. I don't put any
Pirates.
of that.
How the hell How are the Pirates? Did you see that? That the Pirates were in?
They were in like the bottom 10 or whatever.
Was that just for PR? Come on,
they were actually. I think so. No. It's like when the Reds were in on Shohei because Shohei just forgot to cross us off his list. It's nothing.
Or he forgot to put socks.
Right. No, I don't blame the small market teams, but I think that quote was phenomenal. I think that's exactly what he should say. The MLB gives these owners and these GMs and these front offices a set of rules. They say you have to build your team within these parameters. The Dodgers are building their team within those parameters, and they're doing a damn good job. They're getting star players top to bottom of the lineup, and they're doing a really good job. They're winning a lot of games. They're competing for World Series. They now have won 2 of them. I don't know if you can blame the Dodgers. I'm going to keep saying the Dodgers are ruining baseball because I think it's easy to just say that and get the point across because one team giving out this much money in payroll is ruining baseball. Saying the Dodgers are ruining baseball is putting the blame on the wrong party. I do understand that, but I don't need to get into the Rob Manfred baseball higher-ups diatribe every time, so I'll just keep putting it on the Dodgers.
No, and that's fair. And I won't say small market teams are killing baseball. I know I said that, but I will criticize them and say, you may not be killing baseball by not getting the Sotos of the world, but we're not, to be fair, is any Reds fan upset today? Did anyone wake up today and say, damn it, the Mets got him and we didn't? Because everyone's very realistic. What we get mad at is when you don't even go do the simple things. When you don't even go and try to improve your roster with marginal players that you could actually afford. That to me does more damage to baseball than the Dodgers acquiring every big name contract out there. So that's more what it is. I'm not saying the Reds and the Pirates ruin baseball by not being in on the Soto sweepstakes. They ruin baseball to me more when they, and this goes back to your argument about the salary floor, when they don't even try, and the Guardians, all right, they don't even try spending to a respectable level to help your team. And the Guardians, of course, go to that ALCS last year with one of the lowest payrolls in baseball for the 5th straight year. And I'm like, look how far you got without spending. Imagine if you spent just slightly more. Maybe you get to the World Series. Maybe you win the damn thing. So who knows? But either way, Soto's a Met. No point do we expect him to be a Red. But, man, now you got Shohei in the National League, and, now you got Soto, so it's painful at this point.
We do have some breaking news, Kenner, if you want to tease it for the next segment or if you want to dump it right now.
We'll use it as a tease. This is where I miss Elliot's little do-do.
No, you're right. But, hey, look, we finished the college football playoff talk earlier in the show, but I guess even though the rankings are done, breaking news can come out, and this affects the field, Kenner.
Ooh. Oh, did someone opt out? I can't wait to hear what this is.
No opt-outs.
Damn it. I thought Ohio State was going to opt out because, hey, you know what?
I wish.
We lost to Michigan.
I wish.
There's nothing left to play for. Devin Brown, that's why he left. There's nothing more to play for. There you go. But, all right, we'll pick up with that on the other side. Plus, we'll go 3 and out. Jacob will give you 3 reasons why he's confident the Bengals come away with the win against the Cowboys tonight. Plus 3 reasons he's a little concerned about that matchup. 3 and out. Plus, Jake has breaking news regarding the college football playoff field when we come back. Justin Kenner, Casey McCollister in the producer chair. Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you all had a great weekend. We'll close out the show with the Bengals and the Cowboys. We'll go 3 and out here in just a second. 3 reasons Jacob feels confident the Bengals come away with the win tonight, but he'll also give you 3 reasons he's a little concerned about the matchup. But before that, we opened up the show with college football. We're going to open up the second with college football because there was some breaking news that occurred during the pause in the action. Jake, what's going on? What's our breaking news that we're reacting to here?
That's right. Some breaking news by Pete Nakos of On3. Carson Beck injured his UCL in his right elbow. It's not disclosed how severe that injury is, nor the timetable for his return, but certainly doesn't sound good. And if you have been on Twitter after the SEC championship game, I'm sure you've seen it. A clip's been going around of Carson Beck on the sideline talking to Gunnar Stockton before Stockton took his first snap of the second half, pointing to his UCL and mouthing, "It's not good." So with that, combined with this report from Pete Nakos that it is a confirmed UCL injury, just unconfirmed severity, then I don't know what that means for Beck in the playoff. I'd be hard-pressed to find him playing in the first round, but with that bye, certainly gives them a little bit more time to get into it, not playing till January 1st. So maybe he could return at some point down the line this season, but with the way that looked, the look on Beck's face after coming out of the locker room after halftime, and then this report from Nakos, I just don't think it's likely that Carson Beck's going to play for Georgia the rest of this year. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but they certainly look just as good with Gunnar Stockton at the helm. They led their best offensive drive of the day against Texas, went right down the field and scored a touchdown. So maybe they're going to be all right. Would expect them to still be in the national contender hunt. I don't drop them out of that group of teams I think can win a national title just because Beck's hurt. I think they're going to be just fine. I think Mike Bobo's a really good coach, and he'll be able to navigate through it. I'm going to look and see if this has affected the national championship odds at all. I guess he hasn't technically been ruled out yet, so it probably wouldn't, but just interested to see if there was any movement with an injury like this, because, I mean, even though Beck hasn't looked great so far, it's still an injury to your starting quarterback. Georgia down to plus 380. Oregon and Texas tied at 350. Georgia at 380. Ohio State at plus 475. Penn State seems to have moved a little bit down to plus 600. So just kind of interesting with them as projected later round matchups, kind of looking ahead at the bracket.
Case, can you pop up the the playoff field again. I know we had looked at that earlier to open up the show. So there you see, again, Georgia gets that first round bye, which is, critical when you're dealing with an injury to a star player like this. The likelihood of him playing throughout the playoff is probably very doubtful. But if there is a window, that bye definitely helps. But again, Georgia, the 2 seed, they'll take on the winner between Indiana and Notre Dame. Georgia, will they have Carson Beck or not? You mentioned, you mentioned Stockton. Gunnar Stockton came in the win over Texas in the SEC championship game. Gunnar Stockton comes in completing 12 of 16 for 71 yards. No touchdowns. He did throw a pick in that matchup. But 22-19, the final in the SEC championship game. Gunnar Stockton came in. You saw a little bit of him. You talked about it. They did have a nice-looking drive with him coming down the field, but he's going to have a couple weeks to potentially prepare. More than a couple weeks, actually. So he'll have plenty of time to kind of get acclimated, if you will. Bottom line is we've seen some of the wildest quarterback storylines in college football history during the 14 playoff era. The very first playoff ever, Ohio State starts the season with Braxton Miller. He goes out and is injured. J.T. Barrett leads them for the entire regular season, gets hurt in the final game against Michigan. In comes Cardale Jones, who helps obliterate Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. They get that big come-from-behind win against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, and then they go on to win the national title over Oregon. We've seen Nick Saban in Alabama bench a quarterback at halftime of a national championship game to go to a freshman to win a national championship game. We watched Clemson with Kelly Bryant start the season out 4-0, made the playoff the year before. They benched Kelly Bryant to go to Trevor Lawrence, who leads them on to win a national. We've seen some of the wildest quarterback storylines throughout the 14 playoff era. This could be what starts another storyline in the 12-team playoff era. A backup quarterback gets named at the very start of the 12-team playoff and could potentially lead them to a title. Who knows? But that is something to keep an eye on. But we saw last
backup quarterback everyone's clamoring for, and I think it comes from what you said earlier in the show. People don't believe in Texas, and there's not really anything you can point to in that Texas roster other than their quarterback. Their defense is statistically one of the best in the country. Their wide receivers are some of the best in the country. They did just lose Jonte Cook to the transfer portal a couple of minutes ago, which is a huge development as we go into the playoff here. So interested to see how that goes. But at least personally, maybe I'm off base here, but when I've watched Texas play, that offense looks 10 times more electric when Arch Manning's at the helm. You have to, I don't know if start him is the answer. You have to use him more. You can't just use him on 1 or 2 read options and then immediately pull him out. I would use him to throw the ball. Use a true 2-quarterback system. Who cares if it doesn't work, if people tell you it doesn't work? You have 2 guys who are really good. If Quinn can't make certain plays or you don't trust him to make certain plays, put Arch in and let him do what he does really well. Watching the SEC championship on Saturday, I thought something was really interesting. I thought it was pretty clear in the second half. Both offensive coordinators didn't trust their quarterback. I thought that was pretty clear watching the game. I mean, you guys can tell me if I'm crazy, but down in a close game, it really seemed like both offenses did not rely on their quarterback. Mike Bobo was working with a backup who hadn't played before. Steve Sarkisian was working with the guy who started every game for the last 2 years, except for the injuries. That's unacceptable. In a game like that, you should be wanting to put the ball in Quinn Ewers' hands, or he's not the right guy to win you a national championship. Texas has the talent to do it. And I think if they make the switch to Arch, they could really take a big step in terms of how much I respect them as a national title contender in this field. Just a fun stat while we're talking about Arch. Peyton Manning in his college career, negative 181 rushing yards. Eli Manning in his college career, negative 135 rushing yards. Friendly reminder, in college, sacks are rushing yards. So these guys weren't just running completely backwards in 4 years. They were getting sacked, and that does count. Arch Manning, in his spot starts for Texas, already 107 rushing yards. So over 200, nearly 300 rushing yards more than Eli and Peyton in his college career already. Just kind of a funny stat.
No, and I mentioned those QB examples a little bit ago. We could talk about the storylines of the involving quarterbacks, but really the base of those storylines wasn't the quarterbacks. It was the cojones of the coaches to make those decisions. Nick Saban, I mean, who in their right, he's a madman. He's a psycho. Who benches an experienced quarterback in the national championship game at halftime to go to a true freshman quarterback? That's what he did. And they won a national title. To win national championships, coaching definitely matters. But being able to make gutsy decisions like that was key. Alabama wins that national title because Nick Saban had the guts to make that change at halftime. I mentioned the Kelly Bryant thing. People were mad at Clemson. Dabo Swinney. Dabo's everyone's favorite punching bag right now, but Dabo was approaching dynasty-like status as a head coach of Clemson late in the 2010s when he was beating Ohio State every year. He was blowing out Alabama in a national title game. You have Trevor, you went from Deshaun Watson to Trevor Lawrence and just continued putting out, these draft classes, NFL quarterbacks, doing all that, beating Alabama and Ohio State. He was on top of the world. To bench Kelly Bryant, who was undefeated as a quarterback that year, they were ranked in the top 10. They were undefeated. He felt like, hey, we're good with Kelly Bryant, but to win a national championship, we need Trevor Lawrence. And he made that decision. Nick Saban, we're good with Jalen Hurts, but to win this national championship, we need Tua. And that's what ultimately happened. And that's what Sarkisian has to really sit down and look at himself in the mirror and say, we're good with Quinn Ewers. We've gotten this far with Quinn Ewers, but we might be great with Arch Manning. And that's something that they're going to have to make a tough decision on. And you could say you don't make that decision now. Well, you don't make that decision to go from Kelly Bryant to Trevor Lawrence a month into the season, undefeated, coming off of a playoff season, and you did it. You don't go to a freshman quarterback at halftime of a national championship game. That's not the time to do it, and it worked. So I don't think there's a set blueprint to this. I don't think there's a rule book to this. My only pushback, Jacob, when it comes to Arch Manning is, coincidentally enough, we just watched Texas and Georgia play. If we go back to the round one between those two teams, Quinn Ewers played so poorly to start that they benched him. Then they went to Arch Manning. Arch Manning then played so poorly for a few stretches where they benched him and went back to Quinn Ewers. So I know that was obviously way back at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Either way, you got to do what you think is best at this point.
But do it again. Make Arch prove that Quinn's the guy that needs to be in there. Just keep doing it until Arch is better, because I just don't watch those two quarterbacks play and see a point in the timeline in the very near future where Arch is better. I think he's trending up and up and up and up and up, and Quinn is stagnant at best. So I don't know what happens. Maybe it's not in round one. Maybe Quinn handles Clemson, and then things start to go awry against Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham, and then that's when you see Arch. I don't know, but if Texas wins this national championship, I guarantee you Texas starts Arch in one of these games if they win the national championship.
By the way, Quinn Ewers has another year of eligibility left. I don't think his NFL draft status has. Yeah, his draft status has plummeted. But I also don't think he can come back to Texas. I think that the Arch Manning thing he's been patient. He's had Arch in the shadows the entire time. I think if he comes back to college, it can't be to Texas, but that would be such a weird thing to return for another year, but not to the team that you've helped lead to a national title or lead to the playoffs, almost to a national title game, back to the playoffs this year. When he's out there, they win football games. I think Quinn Ewers can come back. I just don't think it'll be Texas. That's going to be a wild offseason storyline to keep an eye on. That's a prime example of NIL benefiting college football, where the star power at quarterbacks, Quinn can come back. That's a recognizable household name at quarterback that we've seen play in the playoffs and big games for years. He could come back because the NIL money might offset what before, well, I have to go to the draft. I need to get that money. Now the NIL money will offset a lot of that. I think we could see him back in college. I just don't think it'll be Texas next year.
I 100% agree. I think Quinn back in college is, I would wager likely 60-40 that he transfers instead of going to the draft. I just don't see a guy like Quinn Ewers with the name value of his, what he'd be able to get NIL going to the draft for a third or fourth round pick. I think he believes in himself better than that. I think if Texas goes on a run here and wins a championship and somehow I'm wrong and Quinn is able to do it, then he's certainly gone because he'd be a first round pick. But outside of that outcome, I think he's coming back to college. I think he's transferring. And it's a team that's not in the field and a team that we probably spend too much time on this show on because of me. But another household name quarterback that I think could be looking at coming back to college football and might not be welcome at the current school, Jalen Milroe. I think that's something that certainly is popping up in some circles around Tuscaloosa in Alabama. If Jalen Milroe does not want to go to the draft, if he does want to come back to college football next year, whether or not he'd be welcome in Tuscaloosa, whether or not that would be an option for him to come back to Alabama. And I think that would be really interesting to see what he gets in the portal, because he's a quarterback that has his flaws, certainly has issues, but man, he's won a lot of games and he's played really well in a lot of really big games, and he has playoff experience, and you have to think that he'd be one of the top quarterbacks in the portal. But if you look at mock drafts and you go to big board sites, you can see Jalen Milroe anywhere from a top 5, top 10 pick to completely out of the fourth round and into day 3. So the distance between his projections are insane. I saw some people still having him going top 5 as late as yesterday. Post college football championship game mock drafts have him going top 5 and top 10. So crazy to see that with some places that have him coming back to college because he's going to go undrafted. So I don't think anyone has any idea how the NFL is going to grade Jalen Milroe. He certainly has a better college career than Anthony Richardson, and Anthony Richardson tested well at a combine and found his way into the top 5. So a lot of similarities with build and play style between the two of them. One's a more accurate passer, one has more college wins. So if the NFL... if you want to say they had a chance to learn a lesson from Anthony Richardson, you can say that. I think he continues to grow and get better in Indianapolis, and he has them at a point now with the Texans. I know it's an uphill fight. They're still 2 games behind, but we're talking about them potentially fighting for that AFC South. I think Anthony Richardson's done a really good job since he's came back off the bench. I think that's something that's helping Jalen Milroe as we get close to draft season this year. So I think that's a really interesting point to look at as well as we look around the country and other big names that could enter the portal.
Yeah, and a team to look out for in the big – I would look at UCF if Jalen Milroe hits the transfer portal. UCF, I think it was Scott – by the way, Scott Frost did take that job. So he's and I think that's, pretty cool opportunity for him to go back. I would look
Florida
at
State.
Florida State?
They just hired Gus Malzahn as their OC. He fits that Cam Newton big body, run the quarterback offense. I think that could be something big for him.
A team to look out for Quinn. I know that Michigan is being linked to the quarterback. I always forget his name from USC.
Miller Moss.
Miller Moss. If they strike out on Miller Moss in the portal, Quinn to Michigan would be a very interesting storyline right there. Former Buckeye Quinn Ewers going to Texas, having success there, going to be the bridge quarterback for a year at Michigan until Bryce is ready to go. That would be an interesting dynamic there as well. I could see Michigan will be a good landing spot because of NIL, and we know our guy Quinn loves NIL. Quinn and Michigan make a little bit of sense as well if he was to come back. But the bottom line is, with all of that said, as we wrap up the radio portion, 3 and Out on the YouTube side coming up, with that, like Quinn, his NFL future to me is based on this next month. What can you do in the playoffs to convince people that against the best teams in college football, putting off that tape? I think that's important. Milroe, unfortunately, doesn't get that opportunity because we had to do the pity invite for SMU to get into the 12-team playoffs. So we'll see what happens.
Let's not stop there. We also did pity invites for Indiana, Penn State, Texas, and Ohio State. So a lot of pity invites in a 12-team field. We talked about a lot of problems with this format. The biggest problem with the 12-team format is you need 12 teams in it, and there's not 12 teams that are worth a damn in college football.
Nope, we learned that for sure. I saw too, by the way, like Cincinnati was complaining because they were
home game.
Yeah.
In what world should they get a home game?
The Mountain West came out. Now they got their wish; they got that first round bye, but they were coming out and complaining and saying that the playoffs should not be about what conference you play in or the patch on your jersey or the logo on your helmet. Then that and I don't mind conferences politicking for their team, so that didn't necessarily bother me. But at the same time, for decades, we complained because the little guy was not included. There was no opportunity. You weren't cool enough to be invited to the party. Now you're getting invited to the party, and you walk in and you have the nerve to question the seating arrangements. Like, you're finally invited. Walk in and be grateful that you're finally invited to the party, and you want to come in and make noise and say, "Oh, I don't want my back against I want my back against the wall. I don't want my back to the crowd. Oh, you sat me by the bathroom. Oh gosh, now we have to smell the bathroom all night. Oh man, the bar's all the way on the other side of the party. I don't want to walk all the way to." You should just be happy that you were invited to the Cool Kids Club. You're in the playoff, Indiana, Cincinnati. You're in the playoff, Boise. You're in the playoff, SMU. I don't want to hear anything from anybody. Go shut us up. Go, Indiana, go win. Go win on a run.
Cincinnati said it. He said if we had the same resume and we were Michigan, we'd be ranked higher. Correct. You understand how college football works.
Thanks for educating us on that.
Yeah.
By the way, so Jake he knew how this show works, how I work.
I said it before the show.
You did, but the good thing is we're not out of time. Oh, no, we are out of time.
We are out of time.
Damn.
We're fully out of time.
But you were driving the college football.
I know.
Bus too.
Look. The one thing that you guys are never gonna get when Elliot's not here is limited college football talk. If you give Kinner and I a one-on-one split screen, we're gonna take the college football show as far as we can take it because it's the sport. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but it's the sport we both love the most, at least this time of year, talking about. So, especially with the way our two NFL teams are going, you won't get a complaint out about either of us talking about college football, especially after these rankings come out. I mean, what's a bigger story in the country right now than these rankings in this bracket? So I think it's more than warranted to take up the show. But Bengals minus 6.5. I think they're going to cover. They're going to win.
I was going to say I really don't see if the Cowboys had Dak, they were still bad with Dak, but I would be more worried about that. But I have the Bengals not just winning but covering tonight too. Will this be their first? Even when they've beaten bad teams, like when they beat the Browns, it felt. Ugh. They beat the Giants. It didn't feel right. Even you beat the Panthers, it didn't feel right. Is tonight going to be that finally that first convincing win of the year where you just feel good coming out of it? You like what you see offensively. Are we going to see that tonight?
I hope. I sure hope. All I can do with this team is hope and hope and hope and hope. And they just continue to beat me down. And hopefully tonight's different. But even if it's not, we can all cry together. We've done it enough times this year. So Chatterbox Bengals, kick off the post game. Make sure everyone is there, joins in the chat. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube and Twitter. Should be a fun time tonight. Primetime games are always a good time. So make sure you're in there late night.
And we got Elliot back tomorrow, right?
That's right.
So, damn, we can't do we were going to dissect the Division II college football player. Damn it. We'll have to find another day.
You guys did dodge a bullet, chat, because we did pull in a graphic of all the non-playoff bowl games, and we were prepared to talk about those. We were really prepared to talk about those, but luckily the playoff talk, luckily for you guys, I should say, the playoff talk took up the rest of the show because I don't care what anyone tells me. The rest of the bowl games matter too.
All right, well, until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. As Jacob said, Chatterbox Bengals tonight, to watch along with the Bengals and the Cowboys game, and we'll be back at it tomorrow. Full reaction to the Bengals tonight. We'll get more into the Reds tomorrow, and then, of course, keep an eye on any of the ongoing storylines out of college football. Plenty more to dive into this week, and we look forward to getting Elliot back. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers.